From a number of speakers who are working on issues right here close to home in Northwest Indiana and Chicago related to labor and to the challenges facing workers in our region. They approach these themes from different perspectives and from a variety of different vantages. They're situated kind of differently in the larger field of labor organizing and labor issues. Our track this morning will conclude with an address from our keynote speaker, Dan Miller, who's the organizing director at Unite Here, followed by a Q&A with all of our presenters. So there actually will not be question and answer right after each. We'll save that for the end and have a kind of panel discussion. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first presentation, Why Taking Action Matters, by my friend Luke Sullivan, who is the religious organizer at Arise Chicago.
It's really great to be here with all of you, and again, thank you so much for coming out today, and I hope that my reflection is just can be a small part of better to understand the labor issues affecting so many people in Northwest Indiana, in Chicago, and throughout the country. I work for an organization called Arise Chicago, and Arise was founded in 1991 by three religious leaders, a Catholic priest, a United Methodist bishop, and a rabbi. So it's a sort of a bad joke, as we like to say, as that was also a bad joke. So, and we were started as a way to connect faith communities with workers who were being taken advantage of and exploited at the workplace. And it was founded because these three religious leaders saw that it wasn't just an economic issue in terms of how workplace exploitation, abuse, discrimination, stolen wages impacted workers and their families, but this was also a moral issue. And as people of faith, as faith communities, we had a moral obligation to stand in solidarity with workers who are fighting for a better life. So I wanted to talk about two stories of our worker members and then talk about the connection between labor and immigration. I think, especially this week, we've heard a lot about this issue. And so I thought it was pertinent to talk a little bit about how these two are two sides of the same coin, about what is the connection between immigration issues and labor issues. So I wanted to start out with talking with a group of car wash workers at Little Village Car Wash. And at Little Village Car Wash, these workers were not paid wages. They were paid $5 per car washed, and the money was divided up between the workers. So if you think about it, if there are 4 workers working at a time and it's raining and one car comes in every hour, how is that money divided up? So workers made could make as little as 50 cents an hour. We did a wage theft claim, and the Department of Labor found that the owner owed the workers over $260,000 in unpaid wages. In Cook County, every day, over $1 million is stolen from low-wage workers. The owner refused to pay any of this money. The process went to the Department of Labor, the Attorney General, and finally, there was a criminal court case that was about to happen that was going to charge this owner to pay these workers or face jail time. The day before the trial was about to begin, the owner, by what I'm sure is a random happenstance, sold all of his properties, his 4 properties, to 4 of his family members at a rate of $1 per property. Then declared bankruptcy. And then now we're in bankruptcy court to try to get these workers who are owed over $260,000 in unpaid wages. And the process is still going on. This started in 2011, and it's still going on here in 2018. It's been a 7-year process for these workers. And again, he sold his property for $1 per property to his family members, and then declared bankruptcy. Story number 2. We worked with a worker this past summer who worked at a cabinet factory. So they made cabinets. And as you can maybe guess, there's a lot of finishing products and chemicals that are used to finish these cabinets. And instead of properly disposing of these chemicals as is required by the EPA, he stored them in the facility. These chemicals are highly flammable. And again, highly flammable chemicals, working at a cabinet factory, lots of sawdust, you can see the dangers that was happening. The worker member said to us that every day he felt dizzy on the job and had daily nosebleeds, not just him, but all the workers at this factory. And then, to increase productivity, the owners locked all of the bathrooms, so workers were not allowed to use the bathroom on the job. We discovered that they would all go to the rooftop to use the bathroom, as that was the only place where they could go. So instead of being able to use the bathroom, they had to go to the rooftop of this factory to use the bathroom. And then, why do I share these stories today? And there are many, many other stories that I'm sure you'll hear today of this exploitation that happens every single day. And part of it is, again, we work with a lot of low-wage immigrant workers who are being taken advantage of and exploited at work. And the immigrant community is a very vulnerable population for these workplace abuse for a variety of reasons. Dr. King never directly talked about the issue of immigration because before 1986, that idea didn't really happen. My great-grandparents, when they came to Ellis Island from Ireland, there was no quota system. They came, they got their papers, and then they entered the country. But then in 2006, with the Sensenbrenner bill, that was going to criminalize immigrants and people who interacted with immigrants. And so I think it's important to note this idea of someone being legal, that someone being illegal is a political issue, right? A law passes, someone's illegal. A different law passes, and someone's legal. So too often, immigrants' livelihoods are subject to the whims of political trends. And I think it's also important to point out that the U.S. immigration policy is not designed to stop people from entering the country, but to make them a more disciplined workforce as they come. Small numbers of workers are given visas to enter via legal routes, right? Engineering and technology, regardless of whether the economy is expanding or contracting, but undocumented immigration can expand and contract with the market needs. I also want to point out that we also hear a lot about this border wall, right? But the border also exists in our cities because undocumented workforces are exploited by their status, and it allows businesses to reap great wealth, and the consequences are continual growth of inequality in our cities and society at large. Why do I talk about this? We at Arise believe that the workplace is an essential place to create change for our immigrants, brothers and sisters. Why? Workers spend more time at work than they do with their family, at home, in their house of worship, in their kids' schools, in their neighborhoods, etc. If most of one's hours days are in this place of humiliation, where you're told, no one cares about you, you don't matter, I don't care what you have to say, how likely will it be when they return home they're going to be active in their block, and their kids, coaching their kids' sports teams, becoming in a poll watcher, all of these different things. And I think we at Arise see that the basis of poverty is employment and unemployment. Conditions of work shape the contours of poverty in our country. So in a sense, more than anything, bad jobs create poverty. And poverty, in turn, is the root cause of the many social problems that we see. Think of the rate of homelessness, alcoholism, etc., caused by the deterioration of lost wages. For example, treating domestic violence without treating victims' workplace conditions will be unsuccessful. If a victim is unable to get a day off work, they will not be able to make a court appearance, for example. And in fact, if you look at educational studies, they have clearly shown that economic precariousness is the #1 cause of poor educational outcomes. So we must treat social problems as they occur, but we must address the root of these social problems that exist. And we at Arise believe that the single greatest impact we can have on poverty is to transform poverty jobs into livable jobs. And that's why we believe in focusing on organizing the immigrant communities at the lowest rung of the economic ladder. We believe that doing this lifts up all workers, including higher wage immigrants, who occupy the rungs just above them. Organizing low-wage immigrant workers, we believe, brings immediate concrete relief, recovery of wages, job protection, relief from retaliation, as well as build consciousness, skills, and broader organizing goals, such as involvement in electoral politics, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe we must connect the immigration and labor issues, because if we don't, we risk advancing immigrant rights of literacy, home ownership, and other important benefits for individual immigrants, while what remains intact are exploitative working conditions that will forever ensure that for most immigrants, these benefits will forever remain out of reach. And so what is the connection with Dr. King with these issues? Why do I think these issues are important? Dr. King was obviously a firm believer and supporter of the labor movement. 50 years ago in April, he was assassinated in Memphis supporting striking sanitation workers in Memphis. And I think it's also important to note that that strike in April started in February 12th. So it was about a 2-month strike that was going on when he came there. I was looking at, obviously he didn't directly assess immigration, but I was trying to see what are some of the quotes that he used in support of these issues. And I found a telegram that he sent to Cesar Chavez in 1966. Cesar Chavez, as probably many of you know, was the head of the United Farm Workers movement, led the grapes boycott in California, and is a great leader in the labor movement. King wrote, "As brothers in the fight for equality, our struggles are really one. A struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity." And Dr. King also wrote in the letter from a Birmingham jail, "Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds." I think these two quotes clearly show that Dr. King made the connection between immigrant issues and civil rights issues and worker rights issues. And we are challenged to do the same with the current challenges and realities that surround us. And boy, there are a lot of them. And I'm sure my time is almost up. But to conclude, as Arise, we're a faith-based organization, and we see every day the role that faith and the faith community plays in challenging these exploitive systems that exist. I think it's important to know as well that when you look at the major faith traditions, all the major faith traditions are very clear in their support for worker rights. None of them talk about a minimum wage. They talk about a living wage, the right to organize, the right to strike on the job, and all of these other workplace protections. Indeed, the faith community has played a vital role and continues to play a vital role in these issues. And Professor Carter's many books that he's written and edited prove that point as well. And I think that they also have a clear connection in terms of immigrant rights issues. They all talk about welcoming the stranger. But what does it mean to welcome the stranger? We must welcome all people, all workers, regardless of nationality, immigration status, and religious background. That is what we all have in common, and all major faith traditions have in common. And we must change the systems that exist to oppress the most vulnerable in our society. And the best way to do that is to change the systems at work and to organize in the workplace. Because I think too often civil rights are left behind when we enter the workplace. Thus, we must organize at work sites for the change we want to see for our communities and for our state and for our world. And so with that, I'll wrap up the presentation, and thank you all for listening. And if you want to learn more about who we are at Arise, more information about us, please speak to me afterward. Thanks.
All right, and I'm going to talk about fair trade education, and I would first of all have to admit that I'm a long way from my comfort zone. I teach chemistry. I like to be, doing nerd type of things. That's my comfort zone. Labor issues are a long ways from my comfort zone. But as time has gone on, I've seen incidents that have troubled me to the point that I felt like I had to do something. So my thesis is that college and university staff members deserve to be treated with fairness and dignity. And it's important for students and faculty to support this effort. And by staff, I mean like people in the dining service. Most of the core faculty would fall under that definition of staff. They are not tenured, protected by tenure. Housekeeping staff, administrative assistants, and so forth. So these are the people that I'm concerned about. Colleges and universities are very proud of their tradition of serving vulnerable populations helping people who have suffered abuse. And my argument is that it's important that this care for vulnerable populations includes everyone on campus, including all the staff members. So I'm going to make a couple suggestions that I have for perhaps making things better, and I'm really interested to hear your suggestions. Before I launch in, though, I want to just make a quick point why I think this is important for faculty and students, an important issue. I would argue that a sound moral framework is the most important thing you can graduate from college with. All the stuff that I teach in chemistry is morally neutral. It can be used to cure disease, or it could be used to kill people. And if someone doesn't have a clear moral framework, they would be better off not ever coming to college. So I think that a moral framework is of utmost importance. I think that VU students, when they graduate, most of them are going to be in supervisor roles where they have employees working under them. And I would say that if I had a student who went on to win a Nobel Prize in chemistry, but they were abusive to their staff, I would view that student as a tragedy. And so that's kind of the framework I'm coming from. Okay, so there's a passion for social justice at most institutions. I think VU really prides itself on this. The Honor Council and the Honor Code are an integral part of our culture. Valparaiso University students participated during the civil rights movement, doing voter registration down in places where people were getting shot for doing voter registration back in the early 60s. And we've had lots of students and faculty who have served at-risk populations. So one example that I'm familiar with is the spring break trips to Central America. So here's 3 of our VU pre-med students in Nicaragua in a little grade school, and their families coming in to get health care. So our students, and these students actually spent a lot of money out of their own pocket to participate on this trip. They invested a lot into it. So we've got a lot to be proud of. At the same time, there are workplace problems that I've observed here, and I think probably exist at many other colleges and universities. Harsh termination procedures. So the Me Too movement has put a spotlight on non-disclosure agreements in contracts. So a victim of sexual harassment is asked to sign a paper in exchange for money, and one of the conditions is that the victim will never say anything about what happened. Well, at VU, and I imagine other schools it's the same way, if a staff member is terminated, they often have 30 minutes to empty their desk and get out, and they can get some severance pay, and one of the conditions is that they never discuss the conditions of their termination. Bullying behavior by some supervisors, and unfortunately this includes faculty, which is really painful. Lack of transparency regarding due process. If there's a workplace conflict, the adjudication process is often fairly, from the worker's point of view, a black box. An administrator hears the evidence and comes down with a judgment, and that's pretty much it. Inconsistent workplace policies. This is something that I know VU staff have been concerned about. Low pay is a big issue. Inadequate health care resources for workers injured on the job. So workers' compensation in Indiana is not exactly flush. And so there have been, there was a time in the business school where a worker, this is years ago, a worker fell off the roof and was injured, and the faculty and staff in the business college had to ship money into a fund to just get this person's injuries taken care of. So what can we do to make things better? So my overarching idea is fair trade education. This is modeled after fair trade coffee. So if you buy fair trade coffee, you're willing to pay a little more because you've been assured that there, there are no workers who were abused or taken advantage of in producing that coffee. And so fair trade education, my vision would be you'd have this national certification program. In any school that was stamped fair trade education, parents could send their students there and be assured that the student would get 4 years of education and no staff member would be abused in the process. And I think that the more schools that did that, the more all the other schools would feel that they had to be part of that. So I think that could be a good motivation. Deliberate effort to build connections between students, faculty, staff, and administrators. I think there are some staff on this campus who are really invisible. There are, just because of the nature of their job, they don't have a lot of interaction with students and faculty, and they're particularly at risk of being bullied. I mean, if there's not going to be any bullying to go on, it will be somebody who's invisible. So coming up with ways of making connections, I think, is important. So one of the ideas that students came up with in a presentation I gave last year about this was a note writing campaign for the staff. Just an organized effort. A university ombudsperson. So this would be a person whose staff can go to, kind of a neutral, kind of like a referee. A staff grievance board composed of faculty and staff. I think it's good to have faculty as part of that because faculty who have tenure have a little more, can be a little more assertive. So I think that would be a good thing. External program reviews I think are important just to get an external pair of eyes on what's going on in terms of workplace culture. Mandatory leadership training for all staff supervisors, including faculty. And then a university donation fund. So the university gives money every year to United Way and other charities. So this would be a fund that would benefit workers who are in need. And so in my grand vision, you'd have fundraising efforts by students, faculty, staff, administrators, but also you'd have a bank where staff could put unused sick days and vacation days to help colleagues who are in need. And finally, you could have even a community garden to provide food for community members that are, need some food. And then finally, due process protection for the Title IX coordinator and the Human Resources director. So as it stands, if a worker has a complaint against their supervisor, they go to human rights. If it was a sexual harassment, they go to the Title IX coordinator. And both the Title IX coordinator and the Human Resources director are at-will employees, which means they can be fired at any time for any reason or for no reason. And so if a staff member was to bring an accusation against a high administrator who has the authority to fire these people, you can imagine the position that puts them in, that they're going and making an accusation against somebody who can terminate them immediately. So those are a few of my ideas. I've talked to lots of people. I'm not going to go through these by name because I think I'm getting low on time. But I hope, whoops. I'm not sure, this was, my last slide fell off, so I'm hoping to get your ideas. All right. Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone. Beyond the city limits of Valparaiso, other parts of Northwest Indiana are much more racially diverse, specifically in Lake County. Approximately 54.5% of the population is white, 23.4% is Black, and 18.3% is Hispanic. However, much of Lake County remains segregated, with many minorities living in cities such as Gary, East Chicago, Hammond, and Whiting. Because there is such a large minority population in these neighboring cities, this past year, Gary established itself as the first welcoming city in Northwest Indiana. This ordinance would not require local law enforcement officers to cooperate with immigration and custom enforcement officials, also commonly referred to as ICE, and would prohibit investigations regarding a person's citizenship status unless required by federal law. Despite some of the welcoming attitudes expressed by Gary officials, there are other institutions in and outside of the city of Gary that support immigration enforcement. One example is the Gary-Chicago Airport, which has deported 12,059 people through ICE air operations since 2017. Spokesmen from the airport say that they are prohibited preventing flights that go in and out of the airport as a stipulation for receiving federal aid. Nevertheless, there has been several demonstrations outside of the airport of individuals protesting the inhumanity of mass deportations. A prime proponent of these protests is a group called Northwest Indiana Resistance. In May, one of our very own Valparaiso students, Miguel Molina, was present at a protest, sharing his experience of his torn family. Currently, individuals that are flown through the Gary-Chicago Airport are housed in a detention center located in Broadview, Illinois, and are bused in for their flight, which is about a 40-mile trip one way. As a result, a closer detention center would be more appealing and accessible for ICE officials. Consequently, in 2013, the GEO Group, one of the largest for-profit prison corporations, purchased 40 acres of land in Hobart with the intent of building an immigration detention center. If it was constructed, this would place the detention center less than 20 miles away from the airport. However, once their true intentions were revealed, community members of Northwest Indiana, such as Concerned Citizens of Hobart, a local Black Lives Matter chapter, and the Northwest Indiana Federation of Interfaith Organizations, united to express their disapproval of this kind of institution. As of 2017, ICE was still on the market for a detention center that could house 400 to 1,200 detainees in the greater Chicago area. GEO Group first submitted a proposal for rezoning property across the street from the airport in Gary, with claims that the company would provide 200 jobs to the community. In many cases, for-profit prisons target towns that are job-deprived with promises that the company will help advance the community economically. For the Gary mayor, this proposal was tempting at first, since the most recent statistic states that Gary has an unemployment rate of 16.6% and a poverty rate of 35.9%. Across the city, you can see the plight that has ravished city homes and businesses. But shortly thereafter, the mayor announced her opposition of having this institution in her city and was supported by many others.
So according to the GEO Group website, the GEO Group is a $2.2 billion corporation. So this is a company that has been kind of receiving its benefits from building these detention centers all throughout the United States. Obviously more concentrated in the southern states because of the obvious closer to the border. However, the GEO Group does have property in Hobart for about 5 years already. And the way that they are receiving this type of income is because of the way that they work with their employment. So for example, according to the GEO Group, they use what they call volunteered workers. So these are people who are inmates in these detention centers, and they would pay them $1 a day to do whatever labor work that they would do in these deportation centers. So in comparison, it's $1 a day for the prisoners in comparison to somebody who were to work there full time would be a rate of about $10.95 an hour, meaning the company will invest in more than $125,000 worth of money if they were to employ real people compared to employing their volunteered workers. And with that being said, the 200 amount of workers that the GEO Group do promise are actually very limited to a certain amount of people who qualify for these positions. So if you actually look at their job openings, they're requiring people to hire who are nurses, who are in at least 2 years of experience in law enforcement, So these are people that they're trying to look for who already have to be qualified to work there. So even with this 16.6% unemployment rate, in that 16%, only a small percentage of that will actually be qualified to work in these places. So it does limit the amount of people who will be working at these detention centers. And as of overall, why does it matter? It matters because it is very close, not only here in Valparaiso, but as well as to Gary, Indiana, and it does affect all the people in Northwest Indiana minorities. And there is action towards this right now. So as of October 2017, so about 3 months ago, there are protests that are going on in the Gary, Chicago airport, as well as the Hobart area where the detention center is mainly focused at. As of right now, there are no current plans, but the GEO Group does own that property. So it matters because the GEO Group is kind of just hanging there right now. So you're just waiting for that one opportunity to step in and have that one official person, representative, to give them the okay, and they can start building. So as long as the GEO Group still has property in Gary and in Hobart, it is important for us to kind of make sure that we tell them that it's not okay and that we don't support deportation happening in our communities. So these are some examples of the recent protests, and these are all pictures that are recently new from October to November. That has been kind of a very heavy time for protesting about these issues. And as well, these type of issues bring in more of like a race versus race, because you do have Gary, who is a very big minority city, and you're trying to ask them to employ them to arrest and incarcerate other minority people. So you have these conflicts between race, which is not very healthy for these type of areas, as well as students who are also DACA recipients are also in target for these deportation sites. There is no age limit when it comes to deportation. There are certain boundaries here and there, but it doesn't matter how old you are or who you are when it comes to deportation. So it's very important that we protect ourselves and we protect the students here, either on campus or any other institution that does have DACA holders or any other students who have an immigration status, undocumented immigration status. So it's very important, and there are a couple of open Facebook pages about these protests if you guys are interested or want more information about or would like to participate in these type of movements. That's all of that. All of that's available online on social media. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. As he said, my name is Jeri Elliot, and my son actually graduated from Valparaiso University in May of 2000. And while he was here, he thought because I lived in Gary, he could come home every day. And I told him, no, you have to stay at school and learn how to be on your own. And he was like, but Ma, I can come every day, it would save us money. And I said, no, but you need the experience of being away from home. And he said, okay. So a couple of weeks ago, he and I was talking, and he said, you know what, Mom? He said, I'm glad you made me stay at Valpo. And I said, why? He said, because I understand now everything that you have been trying to tell me, I understand it now. And I said, so you got the Valpo experience? He said, yeah, I got the Valpo experience, and I'm still carrying Valpo with me now. So that was a good thing. I started working at Buffington Harbor in August of 2000, right after my son graduated from Valpo. And I worked for Buffington Harbor for 3 years. During that time, I became involved with the union, and which was a good thing for me, because in August of 2000, they decided to close my department. By me being a union person and a union shop steward, the company had to find me a job. So I went from August to November without a job. In November, the company says, okay. The union said, you must find her a job. They found me a job on Trump Casino. So on November 19th, 2003, I joined Trump Casino. Yes, I've been fighting Trump for decades, unfortunately. But we organized all of the hospitality workers into the union. We organized housekeepers, bartenders, cooks, utility workers, and servers, buffet servers, cocktail servers. And they said the city told us that we needed jobs. I was one who needed a job. I needed a job badly. My son was in college. They told us that they were bringing us good jobs. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret. They didn't bring us good jobs. The workers made them good jobs because we fought for those jobs. We fought for the development of those jobs. We formed our union and fought really hard, and it wasn't easy. Took a lot of sacrifice, but we did it. In 2004 contract campaign, we made health care our priority. You may know that Northwest Indiana's health indicators fall behind the national average. When speaking to the Medical Committee for Human Rights in Chicago in 1966, Dr. Martin Luther King said that of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane. I understand that. We believe that it's the responsibility of the employers in our region to provide quality, affordable health care to their employees. This will improve the health indicators. They usually resist because quality, affordable health care costs a lot of money, in which they don't want to pay. Unite Here fought for it, and we won. Unite Here Local 1 has a multi-employer health trust fund called Unite Here Health. Union and industry leaders jointly administrate the health plans, from innovative health care, cancer care, to preventive care, to chronic care management. Unite Here health coverage and programs are tailored to improve the health of working people in the hospitality industry and in general. And I'm speaking from personal difference. In 2016, I was put into the hospital for 5 days. To this day, I have not received a hospital bill. For my hospital bill was over $10,000. It was over actually $20,000. They paid everything. I'm a diabetic. My insulin is $491 a month. I bought my medication Friday. I paid $50 for all of my medicines. High blood pressure, acid reflux, you name it, I got it. In 2004, the casino industry of Northwest Indiana did not want to sign the Unite Here health plan. So we fought for it, and we won. We held a strike vote, and the overwhelming majority of our workers voted for a strike. And they told the committee, you have our vote. we have your back. We held rallies, we held pickets, we even threatened a boycott. We produced a radio ad with myself and several other casino workers with the Reverend Jesse Jackson. We worked with Indiana University Northwest to produce a study of the health of casino workers. We talked to every elected official we could think of. We protested outside of Donald Trump's Miss America pageant, which was cold like it is today and snowy. Finally, the industry had had enough and agreed to the groundbreaking collective bargaining agreement, which established quality, affordable health care in the Northwest Indiana casinos. Not just Majestic Star, but Ameristar and Blue Chip. Organizing a strike is not easy, but our comprehensive plan was effective. But most important piece of it was our workers stuck together. Talking with co-workers to overcome their fears of retaliation and lost income is hard. But what I find the most effective way to do it is talking directly to my co-workers, showing them that I'm not afraid to step out. The company can't do anything to me. I'm fighting for my rights to have good health care, a good job, good benefits, good wages. Over the past decade, we have continued to fight to maintain our health care. The companies are continually looking for ways that they don't have to pay. In fact, when Pinnacle bought Ameristar in 2013, during contract negotiations, they took away the casino workers' health insurance plan. Those workers stuck together and called for a boycott. That boycott is still going on today. So please, do not go to Ameristar. Take your money and go to Majestic until the boycott is over. And they'll let us know when it is. Today, our priorities are focusing on training the next generation of union leaders. We need to get stronger every day to make sure that every hospitality worker is treated with respect and never talked down to, that we maintain proper staffing levels and avoid hours being cut and jobs being cut. Companies are continually trying to find how to make one person do 3 people's jobs. We at Unite here, Local 1, regularly have union steward training meetings, organizing meetings, how to do a house visit training, and veteran leaders mentor new shop stewards. I know from my own experience, this union has been fantastic. Coming from a steelworker family, when the mills used to go out on strike in the 50s, my uncles, I had 5, had all of us kids on the picket lines. Always heard about the union. The union is good. The union helps us. The union, with the union, we have these benefits. We have today. Today is Martin Luther King Day, a day I'm very proud of because this is the day that Dr. King was born that he says he would fight for injustice and he would fight for equality. Thank you very much.
I want to say that I love the labor movement. I mean, I really, I'm a regular guy, and most labor leaders and organizers would tell you that they're just regular guys and regular gals who had mentors and trainers and people who put with a lot of love and a lot of patience, trained us and helped us grow to be able to do things that sometimes, and I've heard other labor leaders say this, somebody saw something in me that I didn't see in myself and recruited me, and here I am leading strikes and helping workers organize and improve their working conditions. The labor movement, to me, has a lot to do with personal growth and spiritual growth. One thing that I've learned from organizing all these years is that we all have had our personal struggles. We all have had to overcome things. We all have our personal demons, but what a lot of times we're taught are the things that make us weak are actually the things that make us strong. And my example, just to use two examples, when I was a kid growing up, getting picked on and being called racist names for being Jewish, didn't really know how to stand up for myself. When I was in high school and had to deal with a major injury, these are things that allow me to knock on any hospitality worker's door anywhere in the Chicago area and say, you know what, this is who I am, this is where I come from, I'm just like you, just a regular person, but together we can do great things, and if I can do it, then you can do it. So I'm so happy to be able to talk about the labor movement and what it means to me and what the potential that I think it has for a big transformational change in our country. You may have seen the headlines. Do we need labor unions anymore? Unions kill jobs. Unions kill productivity. It's curious, isn't it? There's a lot of these headlines. You see them all the time. You just got to Google, do we need labor unions? And you will get thousands of articles written about, do we need labor unions anymore? There are about 13 million union members in the United States. Not as many as there should be, I'll be the first to say. But it is a major US institution. It's 13 million union members. It's about 20 million university students. When was the last time you saw a headline, do we need universities anymore? Do we need corporations anymore? Do we need churches anymore? Do we need government anymore? No. But do we need labor unions anymore? It's kind of an acceptable thing to write and think and talk about. In the labor movement, we call that union busting. That is a campaign in an attempt to delegitimize, weaken, and ultimately wipe out unions. Now, why would anybody want to delegitimize, weaken, and wipe out unions? Well, that gets to the title of my talk, Dangerous Unselfishness. Unions are dangerous. And I want to talk about who unions are dangerous to. And to do that, I want to start with an example. This is a more subtle version of union busting. I want to go to an extreme version of union busting. Adolf Hitler came to power in January of 1933. On May 2nd, a day after Labor Day, he and the Nazi Party busted all the unions in Germany, raided their offices, arrested their leaders, confiscated their funds. Now, as I said before, I'm Jewish. I'm well aware of the racist genocide that was to come and spread all across Europe. And if there's one thing you could say about Hitler and the Nazis is they knew what they were doing and they were very effective at it. And one of the first major initiatives of the Nazis was to wipe out labor unions. Clearly, they understood that labor unions are a bulwark against totalitarianism, fascism, and racism. And clearly they knew that it was a threat to implementing their program. And I think that has some resonance today when we have a president who was endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, who clearly shows tendencies against our democratic institutions, for us to remember that unions are a democratizing force. They not only democratize the workplace, but they can democratize the society abroad. An organization of regular working class people coming together and having power is really important to maintain democracy. Hitler knew that. So why though? Why are they so dangerous? Well, I think we can take a lesson from Dr. King on this. In his last public address, this is where I got the title of the talk. On April 3rd, the sanitation workers that Luke mentioned were striking for a union. They were striking to have their union recognized. And in his final address, he said, "Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness." So I want to talk about the danger, and then I want to talk about the unselfishness. Organizing is certainly dangerous to the people engaged in it. In the Black Freedom Movement, your life was on the line. And as a matter of fact, Martin Luther King was assassinated the very next day, and he wasn't the only one. Many in the Black Freedom Movement it was dangerous to their life to be organizing, and they didn't make it through alive. And because of their sacrifice today, we don't have to worry as much about losing our lives. We do, however, have to confront losing our livelihoods. Workers routinely are fired for organizing unions and engaging in collective action. And losing your livelihood can be very devastating to a person, his or her family, and the community. Here's a recent example. Remember I said our union is three branches of the hospitality industry: hotels, food service, hotels, and casinos. Here's an example from food service. A little bit less than a month ago, restaurant workers at O'Hare Airport walked out on strike to fight to improve their health care, to fight to improve their day-to-day treatment. Their employer, these are restaurant workers at O'Hare, their employer declared the strike illegal and threatened to fire every single worker who walked out on strike. And the workers stuck together, they stood strong, and their employer ultimately backed down, and they went back to work with full back wages. But they were locked out for 15 hours. And for those 15 hours, some of them came down to the union hall, some of them went home. They had to tell their families, "I don't know if I'm going back to work. My company just said that I engaged in an illegal strike, and I don't know if I have a job anymore. How are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to pay our mortgage? How are we going to eat?" So for these folks, it was dangerous. They took the risk, and they won. We haven't won a contract yet at O'Hare, and there are more strikes to come, I think. We'll see. We'll see what the company does. If you can get a good look at the picture, I want to move on to the unselfishness piece of the theme, dangerous unselfishness. If you can get a good look at the picture, those are some of the strikers triumphantly walking back to work after their employer had threatened to fire them. You can see black, white, Latino, and Asian, gay and straight, and we are a multiracial movement. I tell my friends a lot who are into social justice but not so sure about unions, I challenge you to find another social justice movement that is as multiracial as the labor movement. These folks are coworkers because we all are coworkers because we work at the same job, but it's the union that makes us brothers and sisters. And there are daily examples of different people from different backgrounds coming together for a single purpose. And as Krystal and Mia pointed out the danger of pitting racial groups against each other. We see that every day in our organizing, but we're able to overcome it. And when you do, it's a beautiful thing, and I think points out the labor movement's potential in moving us towards Dr. King's vision of the beloved community. It's one of the things that inspires me about our work all the time. Unions are dangerous if you're the super rich. This slide, these lines knock me on my butt every time I see them, even though I've seen it like 50 times. The blue line is the share of income by the top 10%. It is the super rich, how much of the total income they have. It's a good measure, it's a good proxy for the power of the super rich, right? The red line is the percentage of union membership in the United States. It's a good measure of the power of working people. They are inversely related. As working people get stronger, income gets spread out more, income and power get spread out more evenly. As unions get weaker, and you can see over the last several decades of union busting have really done a pretty effective job of weakening unions, the share of income going to the super rich increases and increases and increases and increases. So if you are a super rich and you want to increase your power, unions are dangerous. You do not want them to become more powerful because the balance of power. And there are a lot of commentators today writing about how dangerous it is that we're seeing so much inequality in the United States today, how dangerous to a functioning democracy that it really is. I want to spend the rest of my time telling some stories from around the movement. Next is one of the other core hospitality sectors in hotels. Two stories. One is the Congress Hotel strike in downtown Chicago. The Congress hotel workers were on strike for 10 years, from 2003 to 2013. We were not able to win a union contract at the Congress Hotel. The hotel, to this day, the strikers don't work there anymore. They work at other union hotels around the city. But the Congress Hotel does not have a union. The treatment in there of the workers is horrible. And it's something that we're still working to change. But the strike lasted for 10 years. And no one had ever seen that in the city of Chicago at the time it happened. I am still looking for a strike that's lasted longer than 10 years. If anybody knows, I'm really curious about this. But we're really proud of it, obviously. It was a sign to the industry and to the community what a group of workers can do, how long they can stick together, how much they can inspire the rest of the movement. And it did. And the movement spread throughout the hotels in downtown Chicago. And just one measure of their impact is that when the Congress strike started in 2003, the hotel wage in downtown Chicago was $10 an hour. The Congress was paying $8.25. That was one of the triggers for the strike. By the time the strike ended in 2013, the downtown wage was over $16, and today it's over $19 an hour. Because we set a tone of the city political establishment, within the city political establishment and the hospitality industry, of what hospitality workers are capable of and how not to mistreat them, or else you'll have to deal with their organization, which is going to fight very hard for a very long time. What we say in the downtown hotels now is that we are scratching our way into the middle class, right? You're paid around $20 an hour. You have fully paid health care, retirement pension, fair workloads, fair day-to-day treatment that you can save up for a payment on a house. You can save up to send your kids to college. The other hotel story comes to us not from our region, but from Las Vegas. I thought it's a good one for today. And that is at a hotel in Las Vegas owned by our president. It's called the Trump Hotel. And the workers at the Trump Las Vegas started organizing a couple of years ago, about 2015. Donald Trump declared his candidacy for president. In the same address, he labeled Mexican immigrants rapists. The workers at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas went to Trump's people and said, you know, your boss may want to work on his image, and if he signs a contract with us, you'll at least be able to say, you know, we have Mexican immigrant employees who we pay fairly. They weren't interested in that. So it turned into a very intense campaign in Las Vegas. And in December of 2016, 1 month after Trump's election, 1 month before his inauguration, the Trump hotel workers in Las Vegas won their first union contract. One of the other things that I love about being in the labor movement is that, and I'm under no illusions, that by unionizing the Trump Hotel, we're somehow going to put an immediate stop to all of the destructive programs of the administration. But we get to go toe-to-toe with a tyrant like Trump and win. And it feels great. But aside from that, I think gives us a lot of hope and a lot of lessons that we can use and apply to the changes that we need to make in the society more broadly. Jeri was up here as one of our casino leaders, and she's one of many. The union fight was dangerous for Jessica Levin up here on the upper left. She was a bartender at Ameristar Casino, and when the company was threatening to cut off health care and the workers called for a boycott, Jessica started calling customers that she knew of the Ameristar Casino to encourage them to boycott. For that, she was fired. She's still fired today. We're fighting for her job back. We're going to get her job back. We're fighting to reinstate the health care at Ameristar Casino. We're going to get the health care back at Ameristar Casino. It's one of the major battles in our union now. That fight has been going on for about 5 years. And, from the lesson of Martin Luther King, these things sometimes take time. He died way too young, but he had been organizing for at least, as far as I know, at least 13, 14 years at the time of his assassination. So we're willing to go the distance, and we're going to continue to fight there as well. Our Hands Off, Pants On campaign fights against guest sexual harassment in the hospitality industry. In 2015, the workers at the Rivers Casino in Des Plaines, Illinois, were organizing a union. One of the leaders of the union, who is a buffet server, was propositioned and groped by a male guest. So we started organizing and campaigning for protections against guest sexual harassment for the casino workers. Now, the labor movement's been fighting sexual harassment for decades. I've been with the union for 17 years. I have a list of managers that have been fired on my watch who were sexual harassers, where the workers rose up and ran them out of the company. And we're very proud of that. We, of course, want to expand that. So we got together and developed what is sometimes called a new weapon to fight deportation, a ringtone. Because we thought maybe, well, a couple things. One is, there was a lot of very understandably kind of just very dark feelings about what was to come. And we wanted to try to lighten it up a little bit. See if we could lighten it up a little bit. And also, maybe if you heard your phone ring, the ringtone like 50,000 times, in that very stressful moment when ICE comes to your door, you might have a chance to remember what your rights are. So I'm going to play the ringtone for you and then talk a little bit about it. Ringtone is available for download at uniteyear1.org. So we'll see if we can make this work.
Si la migra llega a detenerte, mantén la calma. Tienes el derecho de no firmar nada y no decir nada. Tienes el derecho de permanecer callado. También el derecho de pedir un abogado.
So what it says is, if immigration comes to your door to arrest you, you have the right to say nothing, nada. You have the right to sign nothing, nada, nada, nada. And you have the right to an attorney. So I'll just play it one more time.
Si la migra llega a detenerte, mantén la calma. Tienes el derecho de no firmar nada y no decir nada. Tienes el derecho de permanecer callado. También el derecho de pedir un abogado.
So we have a local one with thousands and thousands of immigrant members who have obviously used it. I mean, it's my ringtone as well, so I hear it every time my phone rings. And to me, this really, and it's also gotten very popular. We have, politicians buying bus shelter ads in Chicago and the Nada Nada campaign. We have an artist who really wanted to sign on and create the artwork and the T-shirts and everything else. To me, this is a good example of the potential of the labor movement. We are 20,000 regular people in Local 1 who all pay our $60 a month so that we have an organization that has not nearly as much, anywhere near the economic resources of the multinational corporations that we fight, or of our president, or of anything else. We have a budget in these single-digit millions in Local 1. But we have our soul and our spirit, we have our creativity and our passion, and we have each other. And when we do that, a group of 20,000 regular people can develop something really cool that can help change things. Thank you.
It's a great set of presentations this morning, and obviously, as I promised at the beginning, folks that are coming at these issues from all different vantage points. So the idea here is that we can just have a conversation. I know some of you may know a lot about the labor movement. Some of you, maybe this is the first real extended exposure you've had to it. So any question is fair game. And if you have a question for one of our presenters in particular, or if you want to ask something of the panel. So I'll just open the floor and we'll see how it goes. And I've got some questions myself if there's time, but otherwise I'll let you have the floor. So, any questions? Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of times when there's research studies or with the organizations or corporations or businesses, they'll use certain types of language and wording, such as human resources, was one of the first examples that got me thinking about that, because you mentioned you would say rights rather than resources every now and then. And when you think about it, resources is an attempt to kind of dehumanize us on a subconscious level in an Orwellian manner to make us less resistant to their any active attempt to demean or lower a standard of living or control us, essentially. As well as that one study with Unwelcome Touch about the groping and the pinching and the sexual harassment on waiters. That almost seems another Orwellian attempt to control our thinking and influence how we perceive reality. And I'm kind of wondering if there's been a lot of active attempts to change this wording and make it much more obvious that these are what corporations and businesses are doing to essentially get what they want.
There's an interesting article that I just read about, I think it was in these times, about human resources, and kind of what you were saying is, whose side are human resources on? And as Tom mentioned, that when you have people who are in charge of if there's issues that are happening and it's against someone who has the power to hire and fire them, whose side is HR going to be really on? And so it's and kind of to your point, it's a very interesting article looking at, we think of HR as these protectors, but in all reality, who are they protecting? Not the workers.
Yeah, I know many decent HR directors in the hospitality industry, but to your point, the system is rigged. The system is rigged, and there's no substitute for workers having their own organization. The company, the company does not have the same interests as the workers does. I don't even know if we expect them to or not. So it's it's something that I don't know. I'm trying to think if I asked one of the human resources directors that I work with, what they think about it. I might do that.
Yes, Alex. I got a question for Tom Goyne. I enjoyed all these presentations, but I was struck in yours about the thrust of where you're going through the proposal, which is in a way to try to re-localize the campus community. There's the usual, what's called the town and down standoff. So practically every campus community has that. I'm taking a guess that probably you've read about some that are doing better in this category. And I just wondered if there are other campus communities that you see as kind of a model for maybe where Valpo could go.
I do not. I have not. I'm very interested in that, but I've not researched it. So if anyone has any,
we're cutting edge. Maybe that's not good.
But I think that that if you could get a few schools working at developing best practices and publicizing that, I think that there'd be a lot of pressure for other schools to follow suit.